What you know about rolling down in the deep? When your brain goes numb, you can call a man a freeze. When these people talk too much, put that shit in slow motion. Yeah, I feel like an astronaut in the ocean. What you know about rolling down in the deep? When your brain goes numb, you can call a man a freeze. When these people talk too much, put that shit in slow motion. Yeah, I feel like an astronaut.
Hi, this is John Cullen. Welcome to another episode of Webb of Deception. In this episode, again, I'm joined by Jason Goodman. Jason, thanks for joining me one more time here on Webb of Deception.
Good to be back, John. Thanks for having me on.
Well, couldn't do it without you, that's for sure. So in this episode, I wanted to just quickly recap what we've covered in the first two episodes, and then see if we can get a better understanding of this story with the Thumbdrive and Julian Assange and Seth Rich. So far, we learned that you connected with George Webb because he was doing some interesting journalism. You were doing this on-the-fly video production switching technique that really nobody was doing.
I hadn't started it yet, actually. Hadn't started that.
Okay.
Yet. I came
up
with
multi-camera.
The idea, yeah, but I hadn't executed it yet.
Okay. But the two of you get together. Somehow he ends up crashing at your place in New York City, meaning you guys are sharing the same bathroom, if I understand correctly.
Yeah.
And,
well, yeah, he was a house guest for 2-3 months. You know, off
2 or 3 months is significant, dude. That's more than a house guest.
Hang on a second. He would go to D.C. for weeks at a time. I mean, 2 or 3 months, he was crashing on the couch. We were starting a YouTube channel, and basically I had said to him, we looked last week, I think, at the Odyssey channel, because on odyssey.com/@crowdsourcethetruth, people can really get most of this content. It's been kicked off of the internet for the most part. And I also have started adding some legacy stuff just in anticipation of what we're doing. So tonight, John, we're going to do a unique version of your show, Hypothetically Speaking, where we're going to also offer sponsors of patreon.com/IamJohnCullen and subscribestar.com/IamJohnCullen, as well as sponsors of Crowdsource the Truth. We're going to offer everybody an opportunity for an extended conversation about this and also an Ask Me Anything session. But for people who are on Odyssey, even for free, you can see all this legacy George Webb content. We're going to talk about this tweet from WikiLeaks, which seemed to speak directly to George's research at the time. It was uncanny. We'll talk about that. But I've also restored the original Thumbdrives and Blackberries video. This was a video George and I made here in my apartment the night before Trish arrived. We've also got this video outside the jail where Guccifer was being held, and George has this Blackberry that he got from a Senate staffer. We're going to do something incredible tonight, John. You know, this BlackBerry has been the source of a depixelate campaign that George Webb fans have been going on and on about for like literally years. People have wanted me to depixelate this image of George holding that phone, and we'll get into some detail about why that's a weird request and what we're going to be looking at tonight that nobody has ever seen before. It's a picture of Deep Blackberry, the guy who gave George the phone. And you can see that phone right here on the table. This is from a meeting George and I had with the guy the next day where we gave him the phone back. But just to address how he came to be a temporary house guest, kind of like a buddy from college who stays over and then you realize, hey, you got to get the hell out of here. I wanted to start a YouTube channel, and he and I did that interview on the roof that was really very well received. And so a lot of people wanted to see more content from us. And I said, hey, why don't you crash here rather than spending all of your money on hotels and stuff? And, we can work on this together. So it wasn't like he moved in. We weren't in business together. Nobody signed any agreements or anything like that. He wasn't paying rent. I wasn't paying him salary. He just crashed here off and on for 2 or 3 months while we were making lots of YouTube videos together.
He had his own key to your place?
The door has a code on it, and I did tell him the code, so he was able to freely enter. But part of the reason I kicked him out is that he was an irresponsible and discourteous guest, and he used to leave in the morning to get coffee and leave the damn door unlocked. So I would yell at him, and one morning I went over to the coffee place, and I told him, if you leave the apartment with that door unlocked and me asleep inside there one more time, I'm going to presume you want somebody to come in there and kill me, and I'm not going to allow you to do that. So,
right,
dude, if you came over, I'd give you the code to the door. It was kind of like a buddy.
No. I get it. The idea, though, is that he has the ability to come and go as he pleases, whether or not you're there. So you can go spend, have dinner with your folks or something out at their place, and he can come and go into the apartment.
Well, he went and would visit his son and stuff, but yes, that is correct. He was able to come and go. I mean, listen, John, you know me. You and I have a personal friendship outside of the show, and you've experienced how I interact with friends and the degree of trust that I have in people I trust.
Oh, you kidding?
He took advantage of that.
No doubt about it. That's why we're doing all this. I mean, this is, for some people have no idea that he used to take a shower and use the same bathroom as you. People don't understand that. So these are the important facts. Again, it's as if we're telling the story to my mom. And she's like, BlackBerry? What BlackBerry? Who's
let's talk
Imran
about
Awan?
that. Yeah, let's talk about
Right. So last week we did the Imran Awan thing, but that was already after you were suspicious of George. So the rollback we're going to do in this episode is to better understand this trip to England, besides the Eric Braverman part, because there was a Thumbdrive and there's a Julian Assange twist and there's a Seth Rich twist. And that's something that I know nothing about this. And then even during in between shows, you said something to me about Quinn Michaels. I don't even know who the hell that guy is. So there's so much basic stuff we've got to cover for my mom to understand what the hell is going on here. So in other words, in order for the Valerie Caproni stuff to make sense, this George Webb stuff has got to provide the foundation, because then when Caproni comes in, it's like, that's the leveling up stuff that you keep referring to. We leveled up. So right now, you didn't know about Valerie Caproni back when Trish the Dish showed up. Valerie Caproni was nowhere in your life. Nowhere in your life. So that's why it's important that we do it this sequential way. It's like, so you guys just did a show. Trish the Dish is showing up the next day, and there's a Thumbdrive and Julian Assange. Stella's probably watching the show right now going, what? What's this all about? So what happened here?
So the important thing, I think, before we get into this, because a lot of people be like, oh my God, they're talking about George Webb. This is such stupid YouTube nonsense about some guy Jason used to argue with. And it's important, I think, for people to open their minds to the fact that that is not it at all. And in fact, I'm really thankful, John, that this came about organically, actually, because people were saying things to you, and you said to me, hey, what the hell is this? What the hell is that? And I started explaining things where you just got to a point where you said, we really need to do a series and lay this all out. And I believe, John, that happened because we're using this crowdsource process, right? And what happens is the crowd, the rumblings start to be, oh, hey, John, lots of different people are seeing lots of different things that cause them to think about this and mention this, that cause you to say, hey, that sounds like something Jason's mentioned to me. Ask him a question about that, figure something out. So there's a natural process happening that is churning this stuff up again. And I believe I am figuring out why. And it is not because George is just an irresponsible jackass with acute alcohol abuse syndrome. I believe, as you've just mentioned, it's got to do with Valerie Caproni, the FBI, and all of these things that Congress is trying to figure out right now, that the court in the Western District of Louisiana has issued a judgment saying that the Biden administration cannot communicate with social media anymore. There are elements of the system that are convulsing in response to this. And what you and I are doing is a root cause analysis.
Yes. And I want to test my understanding because you presented a hypothesis, I think it was in the last show we did, that one of the things I used to use in business was something called the McKinsey method. And the McKinsey method is when you take a hypothesis and you then start to work around it and you start to test it and you start to see, does this hypothesis hold water, or as we test the hypothesis, does it fall apart?
Right.
And I think that the hypothesis that you put on the board a week ago is really reasonable, given what we heard from Barack Obama at Stanford, given what we've seen from the current administration, given what we saw from the Twitter files. I think it's a really reasonable hypothesis. So let me test my understanding of it. Let me put it on the table, and then you can kind of prune it and tell me if I got it right.
Sure.
My understanding is when you and George, or when you started doing this stuff, they being these powers that be, realize that you might be onto this mechanism of independent journalism that's outside the realm of their control, and they might need to make a scapegoat out of you, an example out of you, kind of like a Russ Ulbricht type character, where you end up in a jumpsuit, you end up in the courtroom, you end up as the guy who supposedly was publishing misinformation. And this is why we really need to monitor the internet and why we need a disinformation governance board, because there's all kinds of people out there just like this guy. And if we don't get control of it, it's going to be a mess. And you see that they haven't dropped that set of motivations. In other words, this is still on Barack Obama's agenda. He's still talking about it. But I think that they may have underestimated their opponent. I read recently that the women's national team played a bunch of 15-year-old boys and they lost. Right? So yeah. So the women's national team with Megan Rapinoe or whatever her name is.
Soccer.
They played a 15-year-old high school team, and those
guys could be 6 feet tall.
Right, and they got their asses kicked. So I think that they may have underestimated their foe here, and they didn't send their best soldier. They may have sent their soldier with the biggest head, but they didn't send the best mind. So that's sort of, to me, this is sort of the hypothesis. And what we're presenting to the audience is just the story, the evidence. Like, here's what happened. You guys decide, like, does this seem normal to you? Right? Or does this seem a bit odd to you guys? Like, in other words, the show last week with the Imran Awan, we go to Google Earth, we clearly see this shed in the driveway at the carport, and George physically goes to the house and films a Rubbermaid box in the backyard.
Shed. Right. Why?
And says, this is the right.
Obviously trying to misdirect.
So for people like my mom who didn't follow along 5-6 years ago, this was like, what? This is crazy. What is this guy doing? Is he trying to make, Jason look like he's wrong, or what's going on? Why would he do that? And we haven't even gotten to the whole Port of Charleston, which is kind of the crescendo.
But let me slow you down, because you said some stuff that I want to address. And just specifically about the hypothesis, I think that, yes, you've encapsulated it there. But even since last week, the hypothesis has been refined. And I don't think it's as focused on me as people who just heard you say that might believe you were saying. And what I mean by that is this. Everybody heard about this thing where Gretchen Whitmer, somebody was going to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer, right? So there was a whole trial for those people. And the lawyer for Adam Dean Fox, who's one of the main defendants in the case. So the lawyer, they're seeking information about an FBI agent's internet intelligence company. Okay? So one of the FBI agents in this case, an undercover FBI agent, was the CEO of something called EXEINTEL, ex-Intel, as if he's an ex-Intel, agent or officer or something like that. And this is screen captures from their website that a journalist for BuzzFeed did the following day. This website was removed from the internet, and the journalist reports that something had been done to the website to prevent it from being logged into the archive.org. So what this is, allegedly, according to that article, and it's saying various allegations from the lawsuit, they're alleging that this FBI agent who was undercover, that his lawyer, Adam Dean Fox's lawyer, says this FBI agent was trying to entrap Fox. This guy owns a private intelligence company that specializes in cybersecurity or whatever the hell that claims to do. And what it really appears to be doing is entrapping citizens for various things. In this case, with Adam Dean Fox, they want to make it seem like, right-wing Second Amendment advocates who don't like the Disinformation Governance Board or socialism or having give all your money to migrants who shouldn't be allowed to enter the country according to the laws. People who don't like that stuff are dangerous terrorists who the FBI should be monitoring according to all of this. So, the question that I have now, John, is this the latest expression of this government contract, military-industrial complex economy that's been created where people within the FBI say, hey, wait a minute, I'm making, $86,000 a year as a special agent, and I'm hiring out, $200,000 a month to this computer forensics company that's basically just an office with a bunch of guys looking at the same information that we send them. Why don't I just start one of these things and quit the FBI? And then they go and do that, and then they say to themselves, well, gee, we completed that contract. Maybe if we could convince them that the cognitive infrastructure, the collective consciousness of people in the United States of America is a form of infrastructure that we need to protect. And then if we could demonstrate that fraudulent activity on the internet with things like QAnon and Able Danger and, weird things that we could create on the internet, we could say these are conspiracy theories and that domestic terrorists are, we have these different high school shootings where they have manifestos with conspiracy theories. Now, anybody like Jason or John shows up talking about some alternate explanation for Vegas or making allegations of criminal activity against a district court judge, we can just say, well, that person is a conspiracy theorist, and we can, sort of dismiss it like that.
I think it was easier for them to dismiss Alex Jones because from time to time, Alex would get a little bit unhinged, talking about the frogs, gay frogs, stuff like that. And he'd come across as a bit unhinged. I think when you showed up on the scene with your credentials from Hollywood and Spider-Man and stuff like that, they were like, whoa, 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 whoa. And in fact, it gets me thinking, what were they thinking when Del Bigtree decided to break away from the mainstream and start doing independent stuff?
He's got a lot of Emmys, doesn't he? Del Bigtree?
What's that?
Del Bigtree has a lot of Emmys.
So there you go. So the question is Del Bigtree legitimately independent, or is Del Bigtree supposed to appear to be the independent guy like the Stu Peters and guys like that? So how many Emmys does he have? So these were all.
No, he might have fallen out of favor after 2012. I'm not trying to impugn Del Bigtree, and I don't have any direct evidence that there's anything wrong with Del Bigtree. I just get the impression that he doesn't like me. And when I got Alan Dershowitz to talk about how Linda Rothschild introduced Bill Clinton, or whatever it was that he said about Bill Clinton and Jeffrey Epstein at Linda Rothschild's house in my interview there, he said all kinds of things about the Clinton Foundation that I think he regrets saying. And Del Bigtree, when he interviewed Alan Dershowitz about me provoking Dershowitz to say that the government can force you to be vaccinated, he didn't mention Jason Goodman or Crowdsource the Truth once. He referred to me as he, him. He was talking about things that I said, and my perception is that he deliberately avoided mentioning my name because he didn't want to help me in any way. And he realized if he mentioned my name, people would look up Crowdsource the Truth. So I don't know why he would do that, but that was my impression. And I don't know what all these people's agendas are. I don't think that Del is part of what George is doing.
No, but again, they compartmentalize this stuff. So Dell may be managed by a different, team of people.
I'm not accusing Del. Until I have any direct evidence, all I can say is he's done things that even if we were just working on a movie that had nothing to do with any of this government intrigue, I would consider it rude and unprofessional.
Oh, and I can tell you he's actively avoided my research.
Right.
Because I've
something's going on
tried to share it to him. Yeah, so I've tried to share it with him on Twitter. And again, when to me, the legitimate response is when you see somebody like a Dr. Dave Collum from Cornell who learns of this work and says, my God, I want to learn more about that. And they come on, they sit down for a couple hours, they look at this stuff and they're like, holy mackerel, this is wild.
Yeah.
And that to me is kind of normal. How does Del Bigtree look at all the content I share with him and shrug his shoulders as if it doesn't exist? It's not real. These things didn't happen.
We got to remember, John, is that I think a lot of people fall into this trap where, when I showed up 7 years ago and started appearing with George, people were like, oh, George put out this nonsense about being affiliated with Mossad. I don't know if he ever was, if he is, or whatever. I know that I have never knowingly communicated with anybody from Mossad, except possibly for this one guy who was the CEO of a 3D glasses company called Expand, who is definitely Israeli, definitely former IDF, and I communicated with him about 3D glasses and stuff all the time. Never asked him if he was Mossad, but I presume probably yes. Anyway, I don't talk to that guy anymore. He never had anything to do with any Crowdsource the Truth stuff. And as far as I know, Expand went out of business a long time ago. But the point is, George introduced this Mossad idea. And see, the other thing that I've been thinking about lately, John, you spent some time living in New York. You went to, Bronx Science or something like that. You know what the culture is like in New York. I would say almost never in my life have I encountered prejudice, Jewish, bigotry of people, not allowing me to do something because I'm Jewish or whatever. Occasional, but rarely in New York. And it just didn't really happen. And when I met George, when we did that first video, one of the first things he just popped out, he's like, oh, well, we're just two Jewish guys talking about whatever. And I was like, what? First of all, it was a weird thing to say, even if he was Jewish, I felt. And it was just, you know what I'm saying when I say he doesn't look Jewish. You don't get 6'8" Jews that often.
Is he 6'8"? He's that tall? 6'8"? He's like Comey.
I think he is 6'7", some ridiculously tall. I'm pretty sure his brother is 6'4" or 6'5" and significantly shorter than him. And he was some big basketball star and everything. And this is also part of the reason.
His profile says he's like volleyball, basketball.
Right.
Anything where he has an edge.
I think he's 6'8". He's alarmingly tall.
That's big. I know he's got a huge head. His head,
but the point is,
zip code.
This interview did what I wanted it to do in that it presented alternative news personalities in a format that people associated with a high-quality modern broadcast, covering a topic that people were interested in. And so this really kicked off the whole thing with Imran Awan. Now, let me show you something that I've just added today that you haven't even heard about from me, that a lot of people probably haven't seen in a long time. And I want to play a little bit of the sound from this. Let me set this up first. So this is, we came back to the apartment one day and there was a tweet from WikiLeaks, which was talking about Imran. Let's listen to this for a second. Wait, do we have sound here? Unmute. Yeah, sorry.
Well, actually, why don't you put it up big and we'll wait for the crowd. I'm going to let everybody read the text. This is supposedly from Julian Assange. I don't know if this has to be a joke. Somebody has to be putting me on. And then
how could it get tweeted by WikiLeaks if it's a joke?
I don't know, but it's almost comical how much this is trolling me.
Well, everybody should go to WikiLeaks' Twitter page right now if they can't read this right here.
This is supposedly Julian Assange. It's in a PDF, so I didn't think PDFs could possibly be, well, I guess there's PDF writers. You could alter a PDF writer.
But wouldn't Assange know that? Isn't he super crafty? Whoops, sorry, everybody.
I don't know. Well, anyway,
Scooch in there a little bit, George.
is anybody, what's the audience like
So people
so
are
far?
saying when the Russia probe determines that Russia did not hack the DNC. I mean,
Oh, this is,
So let me tighten this up a little bit because he takes a long time to get to the essence here. But this is Julian Assange. It says JA, and it's a letter to Imran. We discovered a cable, 09 Islamabad, and it gives a whole number. This tweet is still up on WikiLeaks. But what it's basically saying is that there's an NSA report that came out yet the day before this tweet that said that the United States and MI6 had set up a front to steal all of Pakistan's voters through something called Nadra. And the fact that it used the name Imran and another name, so it says Imran, we discovered a cable in the 2009 from Islamabad embassy, Prime Minister Gilani. So the fact that the name Imran and Gilani were in there, George basically took this tweet and presented it to us in a way that made it really feel like Julian Assange was kind of like following what George was doing and corroborating it somehow. But in retrospect, when I watched this again this morning, Imran could have been Imran Khan, who would have been probably running for president at that time or prime minister or whatever. And I don't know, Minister Gilani, maybe it's just a common Pakistani name. So that also linked to the story. But, you know, Nadra is a national database in Pakistan, very similar to what Ukraine is doing with, I think it's called like NDIAA or something. We did a show about that with Lee Stranahan. But basically that's just telling us that, you know, the United States and the United Kingdom did some kind of screwy deal with this thing, Nadra, to suck out everybody's identity and, you know, all the biometric data of like every single person in Pakistan. And it doesn't really, in retrospect, have anything to do with Imran Awan or anything that George was investigating. But in the moment when it was happening, you know, the fever pitch that George was generating around all this Imran Awan stuff and the mystery that he created, when I look at that now, John, I have to say that that was kind of like if you and I wrote a movie script about how Crowdsource the Truth began and everything that happened up until now. And we went to the Vegas, to the Meteor Canyon or whatever to do a shoot. And we set it up, not like a live stream, but like my old school movie stuff where we had actors and cameras and whatever. We might plan to shoot there. And just by accident, there's an aurora borealis and this beautiful thing. It just happens. And people watch it and say, wow, amazing production design, you guys. And we're like, well, we were just lucky. That just showed up.
Yeah.
It's possible in retrospect that that was pure coincidence, that there were two Pakistani names that coincided with names in the story that George was talking about. And Nadra was just a known thing to people who are interested in the internet and information security. And if you're doing research into Pakistan about Imran Awan and him hacking, you know, data, and you find this thing Nadra, I just don't know that it was as significant as George made it to be, but it fed into this whole mystique. I mean, look, if you are a contractor to the FBI, and the way the system works is they give you information and say, focus on this, make sure people don't focus on this other thing. Talk all you want about Imran Awan and bank loans and whatever. don't want to hear about the shed.
Not Imran Khan, yeah, or Imran
Or just,
Khan.
we don't want you to talk about the shed with the server in it. So here's George talking about 4809 Sprayer Street and bank loans and all this and that. The second I say, hey, there's a shed there with a server in it, he's like, oh, whoops, that's the do not talk about subject. Let me go and put that fire out. So when Assange puts out this tweet that makes him look like a hero, he's obviously going to play into that. And there's another important video that I don't know.
All right, before you get to the next video, though, I want to share with you sort of my impression of listening to him looking at that WikiLeaks thing.
Yeah.
So again, not knowing him, not being caught up in the moment, and Trish is coming over the next day with the Thumbdrive.
I think it was a few days later that Trish was coming over.
Okay, all right. But again, I'm not caught up in all this, right? He's in your house and this is happening. So I understand it. And in fact, it reminds me of a lot of the Darren Brown stuff. Darren Brown relies on this. This is what he uses.
Who's Darren Brown?
This is how the group hypnosis, the group hypnotist, the guy who played chess against 12 people, the guy who walks into Aqueduct Raceway and says, I won. And
this is like a mentalist trick, right?
Yes. This is kind of group hypnosis. So as he's talking to that tweet that you just showed, as he's talking and he's reading it, and he's basically laying claim that WikiLeaks and Julian Assange is trolling him.
Yes.
And I'm watching this and saying, that's what people who have psychotic tendencies say. And in other words, you know how there used to be people that would think that Howard Stern was talking to them, or it's like they think that the things that are coming in are literally addressed to them. Right. That's what it sounds like to me. It's like, why would you think this? The fact that it's somebody else named Galani. Imran is, it's the minister, right?
Right.
So it's clearly somebody else.
I don't remember exactly the details of how it all connected, but it was strange. But there's another thing I want you to see before you arrive at this conclusion, because this was strange as hell too. So this happened, let's see, what was the date of this? So this was 2 weeks after what you just saw. This is Trish and me in London. Take a look at what happens outside the embassy.
Press templates or word star templates.
Wait.
Or word,
we got to get rid of this other one.
Hang on. So you're outside Julian Assange's Ecuador embassy hideout. Okay.
Yes, and I've just spotted...
Give us a date. Rough and tough. Give us a date.
This is exactly June 22nd, 2017, 15 days after the video with Julian Assange tweeting allegedly at George. And so we're in London, and everyone's like, oh my God, that's Craig Murray over there. And I say, hey, Trish, that's Craig Murray. You're an attractive woman. Go talk to him. Craig Murray was one of the executives at WikiLeaks. He was the former ambassador. He was the UK ambassador to maybe Kazakhstan. Let's look that up.
Okay.
Human rights campaigner. Here he is. So here. Craig Murray, he's a Scottish author, human rights campaigner, journalist, and former diplomat, British ambassador to Uzbekistan, 2002 to 2004, and he exposed violations of human rights in that country by the Karimov administration, which led to conflict with his superiors in the Foreign Office until finally he was removed from the post. He lodged formal written complaints to his supporters stating that it was morally and legally wrong to obtain intelligence under torture. Oh, Valerie Caproni's going to hate this guy. And that intelligence received by the Secret Intelligence Service and the U.S. CIA from the Uzbek government was unreliable because it was obtained through torture. So then he went on to be, I don't know, some kind of like executive at WikiLeaks. He explains it to us right here. Let's watch this video of him talking with Trish. receive information from Seth Rich, and then George is going to feed me questions for Craig Murray, and I'll whisper them to you.
All right,
try to
hit
politely
pause.
squeeze it in.
Hang on. Before we get to him, what the hell are you doing there? Why is everybody else there?
Because he was supposed to make an announcement. Julian Assange is going to come out on the balcony and make an, because he's not arrested yet. This is 2017. So Julian Assange is in there, and he's supposed to come out that day and make some kind of announcement. I don't even remember about what, but it was important because all these people were there. And so there's Craig Murray.
And we still don't know about the thumb drive, though.
Well,
do we need to know about the thumb drive yet?
The thumb drive, the thumb drive that Trish brought me. So at this point, she has already given me the thumb drive, and the thumb drive that she gave me allegedly contained the material that Seth Rich stole from the DNC and gave to WikiLeaks. Now, wait a minute, because before we even look at Craig Murray here, let's just talk about that for a second, because the whole concept that Seth Rich, let's look at this. It's Julian Assange, Seth Rich. Here, this is the clip. Now, oh wait, I don't know if we can watch this without getting demonetized or whatever, but we should, well, it's news and analysis, so we'll watch it.
Yeah, we're critiquing.
Commentary. We need to get the sound here.
To significant efforts to get us material, and often sits on material.
Know what you're sitting on?
WikiLeaks never sits on material. Whistleblowers go to significant efforts to get us material, and often very significant risks. As a 27-year-old works for the DNC, who was shot in the back, murdered just 2 weeks ago for unknown reasons as he was walking down the street in Washington. So
that was just a robbery, I believe, wasn't it?
no, there's no finding. So
What
that's
are you
the
suggesting?
sort of.
What are you suggesting?
I'm suggesting that our sources.
So let's hang
take
on a
risk.
second, because see, he was about to say that's the sort of, and he was going to say that's the sort of thing that makes people, it chills the notion of a whistleblower coming forward. He wasn't going to say, oh yeah, one of our sources was murdered last week. In fact, wouldn't that be an idiotic thing for somebody as smart as Julian Assange to say? He's sort of saying, hey, this thing in the general public that people are speculating this guy was killed because he was a whistleblower, it chills the whistleblowing effort, was what he seemed about to say. I don't think Julian Assange would spill the beans on their most important, source like that. And also, there's so much other screwy crap with Seth Rich still to this day that it really has many more characteristics of a fake, stupid FBI story than something that actually happened. Too many whys, for instance. Like, why did the FBI get involved in Seth Rich's murder at all? He doesn't work for the government. He's just some dope working for the DNC, which is a private thing. He gets murdered, and the Washington, D.C. Metro Police, it's not like somebody killed him and drove him to Virginia, and now we've got an interstate murder gang that we have to, it makes no sense that the FBI would be involved. And whatever happened with this Seth Rich information? We heard, what's his name? Fat.com, Kim.com, he was involved with me very early on. My original @CS_The_Truth Twitter account, which is suspended now, there's DMs with Kim.com, because within the first couple days of dealing with George, Kim.com was like very interested in what we were doing. I had no idea who he was at the time, but so people are reminding me that Julian Assange offered a reward on Hannity for Seth Rich info. And then people say Seth Rich supposedly is in Israel. Well, we don't know. I mean, he could be anywhere. He could also just, shave his face, get a different haircut, and do whatever. Now, someone's mentioning John Mark Dugan. Now, this is very interesting, because in one of my last phone calls with him, John is an interesting guy, because he's, to some extent, he's a guy who's sort of lost everything, right? He's lost his family. He can't come back to the United States. And he's just hard to nail down. He'll say, like, yeah, let's do a show, and then not do it for no reason other than I think he just gets into other stuff. But Fletch is asking about John Mark Dougan. And what's super interesting is, do you know John Mark Dougan's story?
I think he was a cop, and
But
then
in
he
West
blew
Palm
the whistle,
Beach.
and he ran
Hang on.
away to Russia.
Hang on.
Yeah.
He was a Palm Beach County Sheriff's deputy. So he's basically a police officer in Palm Beach County. And he got sideways with the sergeant and some of the people because he was like an honest guy, and they were doing things like, you know, shaking down hookers for sex to not arrest them, and stealing cocaine out of the evidence room, and having all kinds of hooker parties at golf courses and whatever. And so John started a website called pbsotalk.com, which was a whistleblower site that allowed people to anonymously upload evidence and blow the whistle on the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office. And one of the things that got uploaded was a ripped video DVD from Jeffrey Epstein's house when the Palm Beach guys raided it. And one of the officers, was upset that they weren't investigating it properly or something, maybe more than one, but video from Epstein's place got uploaded to John's servers. And John says that my first interview with John, he's telling me about how he's contacted by somebody who says, hey, I want to make a whistleblower site like what you've got to blow the whistle, but not on the Palm Beach County, whatever. And the guy, someone here says Dougan is a fraud and a con man, but just saying that doesn't really give us any evidence, Bridget. And you look like an idiotic George Webb viewer who I haven't seen in a long time, so let's take that comment with a grain of salt. But I'm just telling you what Dougan said, and then we can put that into the equation and weigh it with everything else. What he told me was he was contacted by an anonymous individual who wanted to have a whistleblowing website like PBSO Talk, and he wanted to upload information to it. And something happened with a Wicker account where the information was sent to John on a Wicker account, and it was too big for Wicker, or I forget the details, but somehow this person who he ultimately would determine was Seth Rich sends him this file, and then John contacts him again and says, something happened. I don't have the file. I need to get another copy from you. And then, according to Dougan, he meets with Seth Rich in this park in Washington, D.C. And it's this meeting with the anonymous person who Dougan would later see on the news and say, hey, that's the guy I met in the park, that he identifies as Seth Rich. Now, in the park, Seth Rich gives Dougan a thumb drive. That thumb drive gets uploaded to PBSO Talk or whatever the website he's making is. Then Dougan's house gets raided and the computers get taken. So the question is, was Seth Rich a lure to get to John Mark Dougan, to arrest John Mark Dougan or seize his computers to have that Jeffrey Epstein data? Because Dougan says he doesn't have that anymore, as far as I recall. And if the FBI
supposedly, but hang on, but Trish does. Trish is
no. This is different. This is different. Seth, before Trish, before any of this happens, Dougan is saying, before anybody knew who Seth Rich was, Dougan says he's contacted anonymously. He's sent a file somehow through, I think, Wicker or some kind of, anonymous encrypted message thing. Yeah. That screws up. Then he meets him in person, gets the data, and only once he has the data, then does the FBI come to Dougan's house. FBI takes Dougan's computer, Dougan absconds to Russia. Now here's the parts of that ring true to me, and whoever is saying that Dougan is whatever they think Dougan is, I've come to know Dougan, I would say, about as well as you can know somebody through the phone. And like anybody, he has personality quirks. He also has told us he has Tourette's. So his presentation style is unusual. He twitches a lot and stuff like that. But I agree with Charles Hurld here. I think Dougan is straight up. And I mean, you got to also remember, Dougan, he's a Marine. He was a cop. I think he's unusually smart compared to other people who I've interacted with in those positions. But it's a different mentality. You know what I mean? And anyway, the point is, if Dugan, we know that Dugan was a Palm Beach County sheriff, the deputy. There's pictures of him. There's news articles about it. He was there. He says he created this website. We know the website existed. We know the Palm Beach County sheriff was pissed off and that he got super prosecuted and that he's in Russia now. So why would he do all that? Why would Dugan make all that up? His mom died while he was gone. We've had personal conversations about that. He's upset. He doesn't see his kids and they're grown up. Who would do that? I don't think anybody would voluntarily do that. So what Dugan says rings true. And if he has this Epstein evidence, we have seen the lengths they're willing to go to cover that crap up. So the notion that they would introduce Seth Rich in this whole story to get Dugan, that makes sense. And once they know, they would say, oh, we're raiding your house because you have this stolen DNC thumb drive or whatever it is they claim it to be. That's crap. There's nothing useful on that at all. It's just a lure to get to Dugan. But now we have this Seth Rich story out there. I don't know how the murder works in there. Maybe it's a way to get Seth Rich off the playing field. Maybe you got to remember, sometimes they plan to do something and something weird happens and it's like that blue hose, you know, that might be a mistake that got left there. And we're sitting here for days. What is the blue hose doing in the hotel in Vegas? We don't know.
And you got now I'm thinking. Now the gears are turning. The gears are turning.
Yeah.
So, but we just heard from Julian Assange, though, that he did get DNC content from somebody.
Did he say that?
So, yeah. He basically said 2 weeks ago we got DNC.
But that doesn't mean it's from Seth Rich. That doesn't mean it's from
Understood.
Seth Rich.
Well, he's insinuating.
Wait. If you're the DNC and someone has legitimately leaked data that you know is damaging, what's one thing that you can, you don't know if you can get it back or not, but one thing that you could definitely do is you could start disseminating fake and false information parallel with the real information. And we've seen them do this a lot of times. They take that Marco Polo website and they start doctoring photos of Hunter Biden, putting out fake photos of Hunter Biden, mix that in so that they can say, oh, some of that has been doctored. Then they can say all of that has been doctored. That's what they want to do. Once real damaging information is out, they want an idiot like George Webb to get all over it and mix, I call it the merger of dog shit with chocolate pudding. You come out with a rather salty, unappetizing dessert, if you know what I mean. Nobody wants that. Chocolate pudding is great. Dog shit, not so much. It's a losing combination. Even just a little bit in the chocolate pudding, nobody wants it. That's what these guys are doing.
All right, so you and Trish now are outside the Ecuador embassy.
Oh, right.
Julian is supposed to come out to the balcony, share something major.
Yeah.
You're going to now end up talking to one of the big shots at WikiLeaks, and you do or do not at this time. Do you know this John Mark Dugan story yet, or no? You haven't even met him yet. I don't think.
Yeah,
you met
I don't think
him
anybody even heard of John Mark Dugan yet. I certainly hadn't at this point.
Oh, okay, all right. So let's take a listen to this interaction between you and
standing right there. Mr. Murray, can I introduce you to Trish Negron?
Hello, it's very nice to meet you. We're from the U.S. and we were wondering, we've been following the Seth Rich story for quite some time now.
I've seen you on YouTube.
Have you really? Crowdsource the truth, you're watching. It's really an honor to meet you, sir.
Yes, George is in the United States right now working on the part of the story that led us down a potential dirty bomb that may have been aboard one of the cargo ships that came into port in Charleston the other night. So it seems to have set off some sort of firestorm. And in the meantime, we came here to see, we wanted to find Eric Braverman, who was CEO of the Clinton Foundation and had gone missing.
It was vanished.
Yes, and so George Webb's series, of course. And when we heard Julian was supposed to come out, we were thrilled, so we ran over here. And we were wondering if you would be able to talk to us about the thumb drive or any of the details details that you've shared before, and maybe could just review what you have now, and if Seth may have been the person that handed it to you.
I don't really want to say much more. I've been carefully avoiding saying much more for many months. I would say there wasn't a Thumbdrive.
Okay.
Well, it may be in Thumbdrive, but I didn't have it. What I was doing was administrative, let me put it that way, as opposed to picking up emails on a dead letter. I was doing something. Even whistleblowers have administration and bureaucracy. So I was doing something administrative. And the other thing I would also say is that I never in my life met Seth Rich, and he of course had sadly been murdered some months before the occasion on which I was there meeting with somebody. So, and I really don't want to say a great deal more than that at the moment.
Have you ever met Eric Braverman?
No. And in fact, until I heard he'd vanished, I'd never heard of him. So,
Are you familiar with a set of files that were released by Guccifer2 about 8-9 months ago that were retweeted by WikiLeaks? The link was, and it contained NGP van data as well as which is a voter data for the United States that the Democratic Party gathers and utilizes in elections, and then it also had some Clinton Foundation documentation in them, and we actually also resubmitted them to
Do you know what I'm realizing as we listen to this right now?
No.
NGP van is a database of voters. NADRA is a database of voters. They're very interested in databases of voters. And Fletch in the comments on YouTube is telling me that Manuel Chavez mentioned John Mark Dougan on Instagram long before anybody ever heard of Bad Wolf. That's quite interesting.
Well, and she just mentioned the Port of Charleston and something.
Because that had occurred. That had just occurred a week before.
Okay. All right. So this gets interesting.
But Craig Murray tells us he's never met Seth Rich because what was happening is there was a rumor that he had received the Thumbdrive. But that sounds remarkably similar to what John Mark Dougan described. Why?
Well, he said there is no Thumbdrive. I've never met Seth Rich. Right. Well, yeah. So he's saying, I'm not aware of any Thumbdrive.
But I'm saying that story that someone receives a Thumbdrive in a park in Washington, D.C., that's Dougan. Dougan separately tells that story. George was saying that it was Craig Murray who received the Thumbdrive. So George is trying to cover up what actually happened with some version of what happened.
But it also seems like this Craig Murray guy is pretty familiar with George. It sounds like he's a fan.
Weird,
like he's like, oh yeah, I recognize you guys. I've seen your show. And the thing that I find odd about that is, so wait a second. So he follows George Webb.
But when he follows him, he's seen him. And the thing is, if you're talking about WikiLeaks and looking, it's sort of like, I don't think you could have been sitting in your house in New York City around the time of COVID and not seen me walking around. There's still people who look at me kind of like, who is that guy? And
I know this guy.
When I went to the court the other day, the guy who takes your phone and hands you a little chip said, are you a lawyer? Why do I recognize you? I said, probably YouTube. Right. And he said, oh yeah.
All right.
So people just...
All right.
Right?
Yeah.
But anyway...
I hear you.
So that was basically that. Now, it's been almost an hour, John, and we have not yet actually gotten to the Thumbdrive. So I think what we should do is, within the next minute or two, we should, head over to our sponsor-exclusive segment on subscribestar.com/IamJohnCullen, patreon.com/IamJohnCullen, odyssey.com/@crowdsourcethetruth, crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com, and subscribestar.com, and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. We're going to do an AMA on there, and people are going to be able to ask me any question about any of this that they want, and I'll answer it. We can also continue the conversation and talk about the Thumbdrive that Trish brought, but basically it was presented to me as, this is the Thumbdrive, a duplicate of the Thumbdrive that Seth Rich gave to WikiLeaks. That's what it was. And as soon as I put it out, Tracy Beans and DeFango and everybody said, oh no, this is the same material that was already put out by Guccifer 8 months ago. And, you know, Jason and George are grifters just trying to trick people. And then there was 2 different versions of the file. And then there was a rumor that we were trying to spread a virus by telling people to download the file. Then George's brother said that I was illegally sharing private information, when this was all a file that was given to me by George. So, I mean, it was just another, there are so many instances where this menagerie of morons attempted to kind of like frame me for some kind of crime that ultimately I didn't, you know, take the bait for, because I guess they're used to normally framing extremely stupid people. But this, remember, this was Guccifer's jail that we were standing outside with this BlackBerry. And of course, the other thing that we're going to do, which I don't know, people have been apparently wanting this for like 6 years, but I'm going to release the first ever images of Deep BlackBerry, you know, right in 5 minutes on our sponsor exclusive show.
All right. You'll have to explain to people what it is first, so that when you release the images, it'll make some sense. Because there's some people like, what the hell is Deep BlackBerry?
Exactly.
There's people who don't know.
He's a guy.
All right. Why don't we, we'll roll our credits, and for those of you who are patrons, either at the Crowdsource the Truth subscription channels like Odyssey or Subscribestar or Patreon, also you can subscribe at Substack, and you should, or if you're a subscriber of mine at Subscribestar or Patreon, we're going to get back on there live in about 5 or 8 minutes. And we're going to answer your questions. We're going to go to the chat box, and you'll be able to ask Jason questions, and we'll clarify some of this confusing stuff. Pretty interesting happenings here. Thank you guys for joining the Web of Deception. I'm John Cullen.
She says that I'm cool. I'm like, yeah, that's true. I believe in G.O.D. Don't believe in P.H.O.D. She keep playing me down. I'ma play her for fun. Don't really know my mental. Let me give you the picture like stencil. Falling out in the drought. No flow rain was pouring down. See that pain was all around. See my mom was kinda loud. Didn't know which way to turn. Flow was cool, but I still felt burned. Energy up, you can feel my surge. I'ma kill everything like this burn. What you know about rolling down?